Nathan Reynolds left the Reynolds family empire behind when the cost to receive his inheritance was the life of their own daughter. As a grandson of the former president of the American Society of Civil Engineering and next in line to carry forth a darker agenda of control, Nathan chose to expose their methods of secrecy control rather than perpetuate them. You're tuning into the Counterculture Mom Show. I'm your host, Tina Griffin. Get ready for a jam-packed episode where we're going to uncover the Illuminati secrets. Your jaw will be on the ground when you hear our next guest explain how the military and the elite are working together. With me now, I'm with Nathan Reynolds, revealing the empires of the elite. Nathan, thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here, Tina. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm going to let you do most of the talking because I'm blown away by the content I've already seen ahead of time. You're an author, international speaker, farmer, butcher, and consultant on everything from trauma to tomatoes. Over the years, you've been a wilderness mentor, farm consultant, master vine dresser, butcher, and more. Your wife, Chelsea, along with your two young daughters, are now traveling the country on the Linen Railroad, cultivating the furrowed fields of organic farms. I'm going to have you on in the future talking about survival tips in the land, buddy. But today, the new Reynolds family is on a quest to see the captives of crime, cowardice, and comfort set free. I cannot wait to hear what you have to say. I watched a powerful YouTube of you approximately 2 years ago where you talked about your connection with your family, which is the global elites, and my jaw was on the ground. Your message has to be heard by every single person around the globe. Can you tell us, how does this radical, intelligent evil hide in plain sight?
It's an excellent question, Tina. The best place for people to hide radical, intelligent evil is indeed masked directly in front of your face. And so the way that they do that is more often than not to just conceal themselves in and amongst the normal middle class American society. It's really easy for everyone to point at the rich ruling elite whom we may be seeing on the front page of the newspapers or on CNN or on, Hollywood ET Insider Tonight. But the reality is that the people who wield true power tend to prefer anonymity and invisibility as to any other level of publicity. And that's because secrecy allows you options. And so the family which I was born into cultivated that anonymity. And my family chose a path of poverty rather than priesthood. And it enabled them the opportunity to infiltrate religious organizations and military organizations to try to advance what is really a multi-generational agenda to steer the world away from peace, from life, from authenticity, from vibrant families that are interconnected with their creator, who walk in a way that is not like the rest of the nations. And this nation had such a foundation of joy and opportunity that was ripe at its founding. And yet
Yes.
we've get picked apart and dismantled until we're left in a society of such secrecy and closed doors and corporate control. And many people are waking up today going, why? How did this happen? Well, the reality is it happened a lot longer ago than most of us are comfortable understanding. So today I'm going to break down some of the history of where these people came from, how these agendas got brought forth, and how they got introduced into our minds and digested and turned into this fruit of this kingdom that we are subjected to and in bondage to.
Unbelievable. I cannot wait to dig in. I already told you before we started, I need you on for 14 episode series. Behind you, I noticed a book that you wrote. Can you tell us what we can find in that book? Because I would definitely want people to go to that direction, grab it, and read it. What can we get in there?
Snatched from the Flames was my firsthand account of this life that I was raised in. I was born into this family that on the surface looked like a normal Christian family that was just going their way through the American dream, on that quest for the never-ending American dream. And underneath the shadows of that was a whole other world, another kingdom that operated with the shrouds of secrecy, that worshiped and subjected themselves to an ideology of what is called openly as Luciferianism today. This is people that are on a quest for knowledge. They bow down to Helios or Prometheus, these givers of knowledge that illuminate the world, to find a new age of reason, a new world order that can architect for people a grand society where a utopian village, for all intents and purposes, can give to people the life that they want only through the fingers of their hands. And so this book, Snatched from the Flames, really chronicles my journey of coming out of that family and sharing with
Unbelievable.
people methods of how these practitioners operate and advance a kingdom that is so radically opposed to what you think of as good and as righteous. But to them, they view themselves as carrying out an agenda that is their divine right to rule over the many by the strong hand of the few.
Absolutely. And you see that symbolism too, the whole pyramid where a few rule the many. That's with politicians. You have Adolf Hitler that flashed that sign. You've got celebrities in Hollywood. And this also will answer what you're about to say when I get a lot of people asking me, why would Bill Gates and all these government elites, why would the globalists want to kill off millions of people? Your answers today will help people realize why that is, because it's hard for people to, when they're new to this, to realize that people are that evil. They have that evil of an agenda. Now,
Right.
you said you grew up in this type of satanic background, even though it came off as a Christian facade on the outside. You told us about your story, but how can people be restored from a lifetime of manipulation, abuse, enslavement? Tell us a little bit about what you experienced as a child.
Well, there's a couple parts to that. What I really experienced as a child was a kingdom of duplicity, where on one side, my family would go to the Christian church, and on the other side, my family was practicing pedophilia and selling me off to family members. And they were willing to
What?
trade my body for contracts, for agreements that would offer them a door into the different societies, whether it was political at times or often the entertainment industry down in Orange County, where they had cultivated a network of people that wanted to profiteer off of child exploitation. And so my family,
Nathan, I had no clue that you were sold into this as a child.
yes,
Praise
from
the
my
Lord, you're still alive.
yeah. And that's part of the second answer to your question, is that there is the only way to survive this is with radical devotion to a different kingdom. You have to be all in for radical intelligent evil.
Lord.
There's no kingdom of the gray. There is the kingdom of light and there's a kingdom of darkness. And you must choose which one you're going to operate in and choose which one that you derive your power from and your freedom from and your deliverance from. That's where I have the protection, where I realized the only way I could get out of this kingdom, which is the big question of my book that I came to, was my wife didn't know about this when she married me. She had no idea about any of this side of my family. That was obfuscated from her. I wanted to bury this stuff and never touch it again. I never wanted to talk about it. I never wanted to share this nightmare of my past and the blood that was on my hands and the blood that had been spilled in my presence. I never wanted to touch this stuff again. But my wife conceived our daughter, and after much of the abuse I'd went through, I'd been physically emasculated to such a degree that there was no physical way I thought I should ever have children.
Oh
But
my
the
gosh.
helped my wife and I to conceive, and that was my moment of choosing. I had to choose whether I was going to perpetuate this same activity, which is you sell your children into the hands of these physiological abusers, and you give them access to your children for a few weeks out of the year every year so they can compromise other individuals with your children's bodies. And that was the keys to power for my family. You sold one of your children into it. You got the opportunity to come into their kingdom and have the black book open to you and the phone numbers and the connections and the networks given to you so that you could build your empire. That's the cost of the inheritance for getting into these upper echelons of societies that most people just can't comprehend. But they're not raised with the same ideological knowledge that these other families are.
I cannot believe this. When I lived in LA, I heard a lot of stories, but the dots didn't really connect.
Mm.
I'm having a heart attack on the inside right now about what you were living through, going through, experienced. And you're telling me that after you had your daughter, your family came back to you and wanted to abuse your daughter and let you or get your approval to grab your daughter for a couple of few weeks out of the year to traumatize,
Right.
abuse. I mean, this is insane. What can you go into a little bit of details? I have a picture here of your family. This is when you were a teenager, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Tell me about the state of your family there and how long did your personal abuse last? And you don't have to give like really gruesome details, but can you give us a glimpse of what you've personally experienced in all this?
Yeah, so my family basically, like the older gentleman that's in that picture right there, is a member of the Knights of Columbus. And basically, it's a fraternal organization within the Roman Catholic Church that also operates on the financial side of the Vatican. And they basically offer people the opportunity to join what would seemingly be a mutual benefit society, like an insurance group. But within that is really these finders groups. And just like you were mentioning, the Freemasons and these different Illuminists that have this ideological pursuit inside them to advance an agenda of control of over people. They do this by finding other men and other women who are willing to compromise, who are willing to become compromised on what they might think as a small thing, like sexual compromises, drugs, trafficking, whatever it may be. They find a way to get them in a vice. And then they exploit that person later on as they might advance them and put them into different positions of power. And so my father, or my grandfather, was someone who was a practitioner of that within the Knights of Columbus. And he was a recruiter who would get people to compromise and bring them his children. And he would use trauma-based sexual depravity and abuse to traumatize the children, and at the same time create basically slaves that would serve him and do what he says because they were owned. You know, you want to talk about throwing a red card down in somebody's life, you throw the pedophilia card out there, or you throw child abuse, or that they are selling their children into child exploitation rings. You can kind of govern a lot of that person's decisions later on and manipulate them and apply that pressure. And so that was the tool that my family used all the way through my young childhood. And they would bounce me around from school to school to school as people would start to notice something severely wrong with this young boy. Something is seriously wrong. He's got marks all over him. He's vomiting up blood at school.
Oh,
What to him? And so they would move me from school to school constantly to try to evade this and kind of stay in that kingdom of the gray. And at the same time, my family then brought in that president of the American Society of Civil Engineering. He was the one who was overseeing the Statue of Liberty getting its new torch put on it for the new enlightenment of the ages that was supposed to be brought forth in 1986. And they brought me in and sold me to him when I was in my teenage years as well. So I was basically the family's pet project that was passed around to continue on this spiritual and physical agenda.
oh my word. There's like 800 more questions I have for you right now. We are definitely going to have you on again to go deeper on all of this because I constantly get people asking me about the whole pedophilia ring and the elites that are involved and government officials and underground tunnels and all these different questions that I'm
Right.
constantly getting. And obviously, you would have information on that to help us. Unbelievable. Okay. There, how do individuals like your grandfather and other global elites hold the power that they have and utilize coercion? We've got blackmail, extortion to shape public agendas. Can you go into that for me? And I'm going to flash up a couple of images you sent me, and if you don't mind explaining what these mean so people can start connecting the dots.
Absolutely. So these agendas are really advanced. Like people are talking a lot today about this medical agenda or the health agenda or the public media's agendas that are being used kind of as a left and a right hand to advance on people this sovereignty over their bodies and over their most precious things, the internal mechanisms that make them unique humans, the image of the creator that's given to us. This happens though through these individuals that are finding ways to control people through either the carrot or the stick, for lack of a better term, where you threaten people into doing what it is you want, or you kill them with kindness and you give them everything that they could hope and dream for. And so my family would use either one of those, whether somebody was in the need of money and finances and resources like that, or whether they were in need of being broken and brought back into alignment with the brotherhood. And this is what got me caught up in the military industrial complex, because I had all this rage pent up in me and this furious desire to advance revenge. I wanted vengeance. I watched people be tortured in front of my face for years of my life, and I was deeply charged with learned helplessness, that no matter how much I fought back, there was no way to overcome. There was no way you could fight back against this system. I was convinced. I had watched people that had tried to come out of it, other family members that would just disappear. You'd never hear from them again. They would just be gone. I have aunts that were in my life that just disappeared, and everyone says they ran away. But there was people that broke off and tried to get out of this system, and they would be systematically hunted down
And
and slaughtered.
killed.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
That
Oh,
the family business because I wanted to fight back. And so I got brought into the military circles where they said, if you want to fight back, we'll give you lists of people that are these pedophiles and traffickers. You go hunt them down and kill them for us. So that's what I started doing for them. I began to be their hitman for hire, and I tried to get my anger and my rage and my revenge and the source of strength back into me by killing off the monsters. I thought if I could just, like a lot of people look at Bill Gates or whoever is the George Soros, whoever's the front man of the bad guy right now in the room, I wanted to hunt those people down. But I found out at the end of that, Tina, at the end of it, when I'd run that race all the way through, I found out that it was an empty well that was just advancing the kingdom of this dragon one step further, because there was a covenant that these people make, and it's with death. It's with death. And if you live in that kingdom, you are subjected to the spiritual realities of how that plays out. And you're going to get the fruit of that kingdom, which is suffering, which is misery. But that kingdom doesn't have any connection to and any understanding of forgiveness, of mercy, of deliverance, of hope, and of joy. And I wanted that, Tina. And there's so many of these people who are stuck in this wedge with this political and socioeconomic and spiritual and blackmail pressure on their necks. That's why the agenda carries on, because they have this weight of condemnation, of guilt on their shoulders. And I'm trying to pave a path for people to see that the way out is radical devotion to confession, to freeing yourself from the mental bondage of bitterness by forgiveness. And if anybody who understands how hard it is to forgive, it's myself. And you know what? At the end of the day, some of the hardest people that we can ever forgive is ourselves. And I know there may be people who watch this who have those burdens of guilt on their shoulders, who can't let them go, who are plagued with the nightmares, who know that they have done radically evil, who have authorized destruction under the lives of not just a few, but of many. But there is redemption, there is freedom, and there is life, a better life waiting for you if you would come out of that kingdom, expose it for what it is.
Yes, I was just going to say
restoration.
Absolutely expose it. I have to ask this question because I know a lot of people are thinking it if I'm thinking it. You said that you were traumatized for all these years, not just what happened to you and what your family forced you to do by selling you off, which blows my mind, but then doesn't, because I've heard so many stories, just never talked to a person like you that's been involved in such a depth and all that. And you just made a comment that you saw a lot of people tortured. Are you talking that with your own eyes, you saw your family members butcher and murder other people, children, that type of deal?
Yes, more than once. These people have a devotion to human sacrifice. This is nothing new. If anybody has any familiarity with history and with the scriptures and with the reality of how these spiritual powers are fueled, these things require blood. These spiritual powers require the blood, and the blood of the innocent specifically. And this is Enochian magic. This is Babylonian mysticism. If you read Ezekiel 8 and 9 in the scriptures, you see that they were doing this in the temples of Yahweh, in his city, the most precious place where he said, that's going to be the place where I put my name. They were participating in this radical, intelligent evil and the sacrificing of their own children to the gods of Molech, even in the wilderness. The people are ensconced in this because there is a spiritual power that becomes physical when people are willing to participate in these radically evil acts. And my family members were willing to be depraved to that degree, to where it was a cannibalistic coven. And they were willing to pursue the depths of depravity, and they get taken over by these spirits and given a power that people don't understand. This is where the gods of old live. This is where these kingdoms have their nest. That's Lake Havasu City, Arizona. That's the place where these secret societies built up a little private island under the London Bridge to have these secret gatherings in, and to be able to participate in the compromising of other individuals through this illuminary work.
Unbelievable. I'm speechless. I really am, because I've heard these horrific stories in LA. I've had people tell me already baby sacrifice it exists all over the place. And now to hear you say it is just blowing my mind, the level of evil. I have a couple of images that I'd like you to explain briefly on what they mean. And I believe they all came from that Lake Havasu area you just referred to. Can you explain what we're looking at here?
Yes. So impregnating into that city is the Knights of Columbus. And if any of you look into the Teutonic Knights or any of the knights and the orders that exist out there, is fundamentally a lot of these people basically get caught up in serpent worship. They believe a different narrative than you and I might have, if you're a scripture believing person, that the dragon or the serpent in the garden was really the revealer of secrets, the one who came down to give men and women apotheosis, the ability to ascend and be like a god, to have their eyes opened, right? This is the all-seeing eye that people have this iconography and this symbolism for, that they could be like the gods and having their eyes open and knowing between good and evil. And the reality is they have convinced themselves that that way that you worship that dragon is to partake in the spiritual powers and be possessed by that same spirit, the serpentine spirit. And so they do specific spiritual rituals to try to draw out the serpent. The place that you're going to be showing here in this picture next, Lake Havasu City, Arizona, is where the city of London used to have a bridge that crossed over the Thames River, and they brought it here in the 1960s and built it block by block back up and created an artificial island so that it could go out to it and they could have their own private island. The Lord Mayor of London came out to do the cornerstone ceremony in 1962. And what they basically did is they joined a financial empire, the Lord Mayor of London, with the United States military and religious order here in the United States to try to bring about the spiritual unleashing in this nation of this society, of this system. And Lake Havasu City, Arizona was chosen because it was brought in individuals like C.V. Wood, who designed Disneyland and a lot of these theme parks with the Stanford Research Institute to offer a harbor for people that wanted to do mind control experiments or basically control children and young adults so that they could have child prostitution rings and child exploitation rings. Like Havasu City was chosen because it was a retirement community where they had lots of plausible deniability as to why lots of old men and women are with all these children and they're going off in different places at different times. So that's where a lot of the epicenter for these things came from. Las Vegas and Los Angeles and Phoenix and across the western side of the nation was hubbed and centralized in that city.
That makes complete sense to me. I have never had the connections of all these different people involved and groups involved explained to me the way you just explained it, and it makes complete sense to me. We also have this sign. Can you explain what we're looking at here?
Yeah, this is at the base of that dragon there, this heraldic red dragon that's been brought in as the boundary for the city of London. And really what they did is they brought in another nation and created a private territory for the city of London that was established there. And so it gave them on one side of it a literal legal protection zone that they could kind of exploit and use under that bridge and on the island there. And so when people were brought into that area, it kind of gave them an opportunity to have plausible deniability and a blanket of protection, a sovereign protection in that zone and in the hotels that are around there.
So where do people that are doing this to kids, where do they get the kids? Are these all the kidnapped kids? And over the years, you saw their face plastered in the side of a milk carton. I mean, where are they getting all these children? I know you said some come from the actual family who sacrifices their own children. Where does every other child come from? How do they get them?
So you have, I mean, there's different networks and rings that are utilized to capture children out of society, and those predominantly prey upon the society's lower class who have a broken family home. There is a higher order use for children, like in that community, of these actual family members. That was specifically what were utilized more there, was family members of these governing groups, because they genuinely believe that they have a different bloodline than the goyim, than the masses of people, than the plebes who can be controlled and dictated. So they believe that purer bloodline also gave them a deeper spiritual and physical power when those children were utilized and traumatized.
Nathan, there is no way we can wrap up the episode leaving people hanging like we are right now. So we're going to do part 2 with you back to back. So people tuning in and you're like at the edge of your seat like I am, we have to have you on again for another section. So hang tight. Check out the next episode with Nathan for part 2 and get more information about his background. It'll blow you away with what you're about to learn if you haven't already been blown away by the first 25 minutes. Nathan, hang tight. Don't go anywhere. We got more information. We are back for part 2 with a man who revealed some of the most heinous things that happened to him as a child and what is happening in America when it comes to child sacrifice, Freemasonry, and the Illuminati, that there was no way we were not going to finish our conversation. Nathan Reynolds left the Reynolds family empire behind when the cost to receive his inheritance was the life of their own daughter. As a grandson of the former president of the American Society of Civil Engineering, and next in line to carry forth a darker agenda of control, Nathan chose to expose their methods of secrecy and control. You're tuning into the Counterculture Mom Show. I'm your host, Tina Griffin. Now, if you did not see part 1 in the in-depth pedophilia, exploitation, and abuse Nathan suffered personally by his elitist family, you must watch that episode first. It will set the stage for what you're about to hear. Also, if you're a member of the Brothers of the Freemasonic Order, or you know someone who is, do not be afraid to leave this cowardice demonic cult and expose it with every minute you have left on this earth. God will use you mightily as he has used our returning guest, Nathan Reynolds. Nathan, thank you so much for jumping back in with part 2. There's no way we could leave people hanging with what you said in part 1.
Thanks so much for having me back on, Tina.
Absolutely. So you just wrapped up about the insane part of Lake Havasu in our country where we have a major sexual predator child pedophilia ring. And they have the Disney founder is part of this mess. And they have older people in a retired community to make it look like no big deal with older people hanging out with their grandchildren. When in reality, if I heard you correctly, major pedophilia is happening right there at Lake Havasu. Am I correct?
It is a hub for child exploitation rings to operate out of.
Unbelievable. I have to ask you this. I did research on this. Early 20s in LA, was on celebrity sets, Playboy Mansion, fully clothed, but I was all over the place. Went to the Oscars, worked on movie sets, TV shows, Miss America, pageant, runway, everything. And I heard a ton. And I heard a lot about child sacrifice. And if we want to dig in deep, I also did research when several people told me about the Denver International Airport with that disgusting demonic horse that was put up for the global elites right there in the front of the lawn. It's really freaky. And I heard about child pedophilia rings happening right there at the airport, underground. Is there anything you can tell us about that section of America?
You know, my family had operated in Arizona for the first nearly 2 decades of my life, but they relocated to Colorado Springs and to the Front Range of Colorado. And that was because I began to be brought into the military side of a lot of these organizations and these groups. And that area has really been transferred over to be set as a new capital for this nation, where a mixing of spiritual and financial and religious societies are bringing out a whole new expression of what they want our nation to look like and be governed that. And so even at my time in the military there, it really exposed to me the reality of how these people are trying to set up an empire that will dominate over people in such a devilishly careful and calculated way. So even a lot of people talk about the Denver International Airport or the conspiracy theories that go on there. I can't speak specifically to what is taking place there under that blue horse. People call it Lucifer and other names like that. However, all throughout that Front Range there, what you do find is these child sacrifice cults that are operating in different cases that were very newsworthy at their times of their taking place, like in Boulder, Colorado, and another one that took place near where my wife and I were living when her and I first started coming out and talking about all this stuff, which is Jessica Ridgway. And if you go to my YouTube channel, you can see the first video that's posted on there is a documentary that was shot there about 3.5 years ago that chronicled that case. It's the first video I ever uploaded. It's called Child Exploitation Rings and Secret Plutonium Weapon Sites. And the military and these covens and operators are basically going through and they are utilizing these occult groups who already offer them a carte blanche, the opportunity to do their business without any questions asked, who are willing to exploit children, ritualistically murder them, and then gain public opinion and advance legal agendas. So this is where we see a lot of the political side exploiting the death and the suffering of children so that they can advance basically stripping ways of our rights and of our freedoms that we've been given and guaranteed. And so that's a case that took place there. You can watch that documentary if you want to hear more about that case and some of the individuals that were involved.
It blows my mind. Is that why evil is prevailing on American soil? I'm always questioning, and so many people that I work with and on the front of the battle lines here in Nashville to try to save our and preserve our freedoms in America and protect our kids. We're like, why are these so-called Christian leaders, even the Christian leaders? We know that demon-possessed leaders are going to do the opposite, but even our Christian leaders aren't stepping out and protecting our children. Is it because they're a part of what you're talking about?
You know, it's a little too general for me to say that each one of these people is a part of it particularly. However, these people are being subjected to the indoctrinations of this other religion, which is the old religion. It goes all the way back to the serpent worshipers and these people that are willing to trade good and turn it into evil and call evil good. And they are willing to explain to people the mechanics of this only when they are willing to compromise their convictions for what I believe is the authoritative truth, the word and the scriptures. This is the authoritative truth. And if they can get people to basically compromise their understanding of reality and to believe a pseudoscientific religious system that was put forth in humanism and with evolution, this theory of these natural selection and the advancements of the favored races and this kind of divine rights to rule that gave them a spiritual and legal stance as to why they could control the mass population and infiltrate the education societies, rewrite American history, rewrite our ability to even know what is the truth, what actually happened here in this nation. And this is where you have different non-tax exempt foundations like the Rockefellers and the Carnegie Foundations and the Ford Foundations that start to get their tendrils into the different fabrics of our society, like our seminaries or even into the medical communities. And you start to see this flowing in of changes to push the society in a direction that they wouldn't go with if they actually knew what was going to happen long term.
So this all makes sense to me, how you mentioned the medical side with the pharmakia, witchcraft, with the word pharmacy. That's what it means. You've got the Hollywood side, television. They're telling a vision, and there's sorcery and witchcraft in Hollywood. You've got the elites running government, working for China, the communist takeover. You are helping me put all of the pieces together. This is unbelievable. I want to go into, well, here's another little comment I want to make. You talked about Denver International Airport, child pedophilia, everything going on over there. I heard about sex trafficking over there for like 2 decades. The crazy thing is, the positive side that politicians would always talk about is if we ever got bombed out in Washington, D.C., we're just going to set up our government right there in Denver with all the mountains that surround it to help protect them, even for the airspace of potential invaders coming in. Now I'm starting to realize why they're setting up base in Denver International Airport. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, this was the most well-known deep underground military base that was publicly acknowledged, right? Cheyenne Mountain, you know, which is where I was, right next to where I was stationed in the United States military, which was a giant mountain they hollowed out to put a base inside. The entire base is built on giant springs to be able to withstand a nuclear attack, a direct nuclear attack. And this is the place where they basically tunneled out. You have numerous, nearly half a dozen, just around Colorado Springs alone, you have half a dozen military bases, the United States Air Force Academy, which is pockmarking that entire region for a military bastion for what is really the religious and political side rolling out of the Denver area. And you've seen a lot of that takeover happen, even back in 2008 when President to be elected at the time, Barack Hussein Obama was going through his public reset, you know, when he received the nominee to be the president for the Democratic Party's contention, you know, in that great battle. He was standing on the throne of Pergamum, which you see in the scriptures in Revelation as the throne of Zeus, right? The throne of Satan. And he was standing on a recreation of that throne of Pergamum that was in the Berlin Museum and had been captured there. His architect designed the very throne of Satan for him to stand upon when he took that speech in. And none of this stuff is none of this stuff is coincidental. You know, the people are very strategic because they're following a spiritual order. They genuinely are communicating with spiritual powers behind the scenes, not the front runners, maybe particularly that we're seeing the actors on the front page, but the individuals that really put pressure and apply this, the mentorship that's behind the scenes, the priest who's behind the confessional, if you will, that is willing to live their life behind the curtain for the sake of maintaining their anonymity and thus their power.
Nathan, you went through hell and back again as a kid, but man, is God using you as a warrior for the end times. I have a feeling this interview is going to be heard by a lot of people after we've been raptured. And that's why I think the attack was full on today with even giving you on the program, tech issues, you name it. Satan didn't want this message going out. You are blowing my mind with how God is using you in the end times. Unbelievable.
I have a ferocious desire for people to have conviction in their life for the truths that they find. And I want them to be encouraged to know that even if I talk about this radical, intelligent evil, this massive, overwhelming, we're out-financed, we're outgunned, we're outnumbered, we're surrounded on all sides and cut off from reinforcements, this kind of dread that people can feel as they get put this weight of understanding on their shoulders. My desire is never to leave anybody there, because I need to tell you that no matter how much you see the enemy's works being brought forth, and it's their revelation, it's their season of revelation, where they're revealing their beast system, their anti-Messiah military that is being brought forth, this system to enslave mankind. As that's being revealed, people must take courage of knowing that there's also a revelation. It's like the fifth gospel. If you haven't read the book of Revelation, it is the revelation of Jesus, Yeshua the Messiah, as the conqueror of conquerors, the King of kings. The good news of his kingdom is that we have a hope. We have a guarantee if we put our faith and our trust in him and we walk in his ways and we guard his instructions and we live a set apart lifestyle, that we have immortality, incorruptible immortality promised to us, and a life of conviction brings that out. When we live that out here, not with this defeatist mentality, not with this we're already conquered and condemned, no, that we stand boldly and we seek to advance the kingdom of righteousness and of truth, no matter the cost, no matter the consequences. He will give unto us the resources, the will, the desire, the understanding, the knowledge, the strength to persevere and to be overcomers, because he says he wants us to be overcomers by the blood of the Lamb, by the words of our testimony, and not loving our lives when even faced with death. That's how we defeat the dragon of old. At the end of it, when he's thrown into a lake of fire, we outlive him. We don't need to slay this dragon. We just need to outlive him. And that's why much of my life and my trajectory now is to teach people to live vibrantly, passionate, filled with truth, filled with knowledge, and understanding of how do we get back to the ways that made men and women strong? How do women live in a way that's so fierce, so protective, and so impassioned that the world is infected, that the heart of the home is filled with life again? How do men get their testosterone back, their chutzpah, and grow some balls and be willing to be the mighty men of valor like David used to call upon, like champions of warfare, but not just the warfare of the sword, but the warfare from this one that comes out of our mouth. And I believe that we can get there if we're willing to leave that other kingdom behind and be willing to pursue a life of radical devotion to the wondrous kingdom we found.
You are so empowering. It's blowing my mind. You have a lot of stuff in this episode is blowing my mind. You're right on target with what you're saying. You're right on target. People are living in fear. They're masking up. They're staying 6 feet apart. And that's the exact opposite of what God wants with the little time that we got left. To dig in deep for the last couple of questions that I'm just dying to ask you, you talked a little bit about your military background. What are some of the ways America's entertainment, military, and religious elite are working together to advance a generational utopian goal?
People, if they don't really have an understanding of the history of where religious, science, politics, entertainment kind of got this all-seeing eye of control brought into its society. But it's wise for people to really read first source documents on where these people got their starts. And if you go back to, as you were talking about earlier, the Illuminati or the Freemasonic or the Illuminist societies that are out there, their goal was to basically be a counter to this Reformation that was taking place, this approach of people that were trying to read the scriptures for themselves and get themselves freed from the shackles of slavery that had been placed over them by many standards by the Roman Catholic Church for generations, for hundreds of years. The people were deprived of knowledge, of truth, of a way of living that would empower them to be authentic. And they were so eager for freedom. So there was this explosion that took place all over Europe, but it infected the world, where people had this hope. This unbelievable idea began to set itself into the minds of men that they could be free and autonomous agents, not constrained by a religious order that required you to come in and tell your dirty secrets to a corrupt man behind a curtain who could then exploit you later on. And so instead, there was a counter-reformation, and that really came from the founding of Ignacio Loyola, this individual who started the Jesuit order. And he was basically bringing about an agenda to circumvent, predominantly through the education systems of society, basically a way of controlling the minds of men through what we taught them. And so this was an order that was the militant arm of the Vatican, whereas the Knights of Columbus are often called the left hand, the popes, the Black Pope, the general, superior general of the Jesuit order. He is the one who rules with a militant hand. And so they began to bring in an intelligence array, an intelligence network. And it's the oldest intelligence network that's in the world today, which is the Jesuit order. And they have practiced a way of infiltrating of people's livelihoods through their own agents into the different governing societies of the world. The entertainment industry, you have the socioeconomic industrial tycoons and the managers of the money systems that we live in. And you see this total takeover that was brought into place through these fraternal organizations and these people that were willing to swear oaths, to swear agreements to another kingdom, to make a covenant with other brothers and sisters who would conceal their works no matter the cost. And it infected our society. And from that, we see the flow of money and military power being poured into the United States, who was basically became these bulldogs of enforcements for these strategies and tactics for the world, under the guise of being the land of the free and the home of the brave. But while I was a soldier in the United States military, I was being exploited by these same individuals to hunt down and kill competitors to corporate contracts. Meanwhile, being told that these are the bad guys, and we promise that Americans, the hero, we're going to go out and we're going to save the world and we're defending freedom. I wasn't defending the freedom of the nations like I was convinced that I was doing when I was growing up in this world and taught about our founding fathers, these good, godly Christian men who saved the day. Meanwhile, never hearing about their fraternal societies and their orders of agreements to these other kingdoms, these other Elohim, these other gods. And so I was all in on that kingdom. I thought that was the way we delivered the world from the oppressor, is to fight them off, to kill them one by one. But that's what our society is being built up. You feel this culminating idea of civil war, of we're going to have to fight back and we got our guns. And let me tell you, when you want to fight a nation like this, when you want to try to tear down and dismantle an empire, you don't fight them with their same weapons, because they can slaughter nations in an hour. We've seen this and witnessed this throughout history. You fight them by outliving them. These people have grown up in a lifestyle that has deprived them of conviction. They are cowards and they know it.
Yeah.
And they are broken in their souls and they have lost their sense of purpose and of courage. And if you live a life that's set apart, they can examine your fruits and start to be infected by the idea that they themselves could be set free, that they themselves could have a life of meaning and of purpose and of manliness. And they could take back this system away from these people. And you do it by abstaining, by setting yourself apart from that, by not giving your children over to coercive education, to 15,000 hours of compulsory education.
No way.
You would never give a child that's 5 years old the keys to a vehicle,
Nope.
but you would give a stranger you've never met the ability to manipulate your children's minds, their souls, for 15,000 hours to set them against you and dismantle the home from within.
Yep.
So my focus of our ministry and the trajectory my wife and I are doing now is to try to show people another option, to give them the counter to dismantle that empire, which is living a lifestyle that is set apart.
Absolutely fantastic. And for the people tuning in saying they no longer want to be a benchwarmer Christian, if they are, or they're on fire and they feel worn out, what can you do to encourage us about the importance of not keeping our head in the sand and to keep doing what God's called us to do, or step foot out there for the first time if we have been scared in the past to do so.
It's an incredibly important question for this time. And of anything I can encourage you to do, it is to fast and carve off of your flesh your addictions to that other system. I have been so wholly entertained throughout my life. I have been addicted to those little black mirrors and those images to just escape for a moment this frustration and the reality of my life and my situation. But if you can abstain from that, if you can fast that away from you, like for me, I took a year of not watching television, of not watching the news, of not listening to other influences, and I immersed myself in this word. Like I actually began to read it, but not like, kind of read it, like read it. Like it was a historically reliable text, like that everything that was in there was true and I could bet my life on it. And it began to transform me. And I know for you, if any of you is feeling that weightiness of that despair and of that helplessness, that learned helplessness, it is by design. But you have a designer who created you, who knit you together, who made you for such a time as this. There was no other time in all of creation that you should have been born but this hour. And you have been given truth at your fingertips. There's been generations who have never had an opportunity to come to know the truth that you can find in a moment. And you should not squander that, because that dragon is seeking to eat our time. It's the one commodity, the one resource we all have in equal abundance, and we must use it strategically. And the way we do that is by learning the instructions of our Father. This is the manual. When I was in the United States military, when they take you from civilian to trained murderer, they start by giving you a manual, an instruction book, and they tell you to sit down and read it 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 and let it wash over your mind, because it says that this is a sword, a living and active sword, but it's also like water. This water of the word that we're supposed to wash our minds with, that men, if we have wives, we're supposed to wash our wives with, because we get stained when they're out there in the world. We get all this infection on us. And it's this virus of the fear of men, the fear of failure, the fear of lack, the fear of not having enough, the fear of not a failure. And those fears impregnate us, and they give birth to this fruit of deception and this fruit of compromise. But if you saturate yourself in that word, if you saturate yourself in an understanding of who your creator is and the kingdom that he is all about, from Genesis to Revelation, it will make you a new man. It will make you a new woman, and it will transform the lives of you. And it may bring you the greatest suffering you've ever experienced. It may make you mocked. Like it says in the book of Jude, these mockers are going to come out. It may bring out the claws of the people around you that you never knew were there. But really, you are a living witness that's convicting them by the way you live your life. And it offers other people the opportunity to see another option. And it transforms the world around you, one life at a time. I told you guys earlier, I went all in. They sent assassins after my wife and I and have attempted to murder us numerous times, but I have seen their guns jam. I have seen their vehicles stop working in front of my face. I have not had to fight them with the weapons, the carnal weapons that I used to fight with. I have learned that the sword coming out of my mouth is far more dangerous, because it cuts to the heart of men. So it happened in Acts chapter 7 when Stephen opened his mouth and preached the truth from Genesis to that moment about who the Messiah is. And the people were cut to their heart, and they can gnash their teeth at him and killed him. But you know what? The blood of that man's body was the fertilizer to the soils of a new kingdom rising up out of the dust from where it had been in. Because you know what? When his people call to him, he answers and he rescues and he saves. And that is the good news that brought me out of that kingdom and has given me a new life.
Where can people tune into everything you've got?
People can head over to snatchedfromtheflames.com, and there they can find some of the resources to our videos. I have my digital copy of the book there for free if people want to be able to read it. I also have an audiobook. I don't want any of the information that I bring forth to ever be blocked behind some kind of paywall. So if you guys don't have the means to acquire any of it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and know that we have all of this there and available for you guys to be able to be encouraged and be empowered to overcome the days of evil that we may be living in.
Snatchedfromtheflames.com. Nathan Reynolds, you, your wife, kids, I will be praying for you often for your safety. Keep preaching the truth, exposing these globalists. And thank you for helping me personally put a lot more pieces together on the last part 1 and part 2 of the Counterculture Mom Show, exposing the Illuminati from within. You are a joy. Keep at it.
Thank you, Tina. Live dangerously now.